This research investigates the connection between speech perception and production when learning to produce and discriminate between new sounds. It is commonly assumed that speech perception and production use the same cognitive mechanisms. If this assumption is correct, when we get better at perceiving sounds, we should also get better at producing them, and vice versa. However, recent research indicates that speech perception and production do not have a cooperative relationship, but a competitive one. That is, speech perception and production may not develop in tandem. This research asks, how do different training modalities or procedures for learning unfamiliar sounds influence how speakers learn to perceive and produce new sounds? Specifically, how does engaging in perception and production while learning new sounds affect how speakers learn to produce the new sounds?
30 native Spanish speakers with minimal experience with Basque, English, or other non-native languages, as well as 20 native Spanish speakers with no experience with or exposure to Basque, participated in this experiment over the course of 2 days. All participants completed a pre-test, training period, and post-test on each day. Both the pre- and post-tests consisted of an ABX task without feedback, in which participants had to discriminate between pairs of sounds from 3 continua over 72 trials of 3 tokens. Participants were first presented with 2 sounds, and then with a third, and were asked whether the third was the same as the first or second sound. During the training period, the participants were presented with the same ABX task, but feedback was provided 1 second after the participant responded, and only stimuli from one sound contrast, sa versus sha, was presented. The experiment consisted of 3 conditions: perception only, perception and production X, and perception and production letter. Perception-only participants heard tokens and only made a perceptual judgment using the ABX discrimination task, while perception and production X participants heard the tokens, repeated and recorded the final token, and also made the same perceptual judgment. The perception and production letter condition was identical to the perception and production X condition, but participants repeated an unrelated letter presented on the screen, such as L, M, N, O, or P, none of which include the critical sounds tested in their pronunciation, and then the participants' scores from the pre- and post-tests were compared.
In addition to examining the perceptual learning of participants, or the participants' ability to hear the difference between sounds, we analyzed the participants' pronunciations, or their productions of the unfamiliar sounds, using a linear discriminant analysis. The linear discriminant analysis model, or LDA for short, was applied to the pre- and post-test productions of the participants across the 3 experimental conditions, to determine if participants were developing phonological categories for the unfamiliar sounds in their productions. The LDA uses multiple phonetic dimensions to classify the productions, as participants may show improvement on one phonetic dimension but not another. The multidimensionality of LDA is advantageous because a single acoustic measure may not capture the complexity of production. The specific phonetic dimensions included duration, intensity, center of gravity, skew, and standard deviation. So if we shift our attention to the plots, in both plots 1 and 2, the y-axes represent the LDA distinction accuracy score. Essentially, the LDA model is trained to distinguish between 2 phonological categories, and the more accurately it can predict the phonological category of the participants' productions, the higher the score. If participants did show improvement in production learning, we would expect that the Day 2 post-test LDA scores to be higher than the Day 1 pre-test score. The x-axes in plots 1 and 2 represent the 3 training modalities. Plot 2 shows the individual LDA analyses of each sound contrast that were learned in the experiments, whereas in plot 1, all the sound contrasts are compounded, and these are the average LDA scores for all the sound contrasts across the 3 conditions.
This research paints a more complex picture of the relationship between perception and production while learning a new sound contrast. The results suggest that producing a new sound contrast during the training period will lead to improvement in producing the unfamiliar sound contrast. Similarly, producing an unrelated token during the trial period caused worse production performance, suggesting a negative influence of disruption during production. It was also found that perception-only training did not help in production for the contrast, which aligns with results from previous research. But there was also a perplexing result obtained from the data. The LDA analysis shows that participants in the production conditions produce more accurate productions after training than before, but they did not actually get significantly better at the production of the trained contrast. These results suggest that participants are getting better generalization, but not on the trained contrast. We're currently analyzing individuals' acoustic measures of the production task to better understand this result. We're also investigating any correlation between perception and production scores. Different conditions for which the production takes place under is a factor we've been manipulating and will continue to look at for future research. This study is important for furthering our understanding of effective language education and how teachers can tailor their classes to best help their students. Language learning tends to be a difficult process for adults, so any methods to make it easier are greatly beneficial. The research also sheds more light on how we process and learn new sounds, helping linguists better understand the mechanisms behind this process.